this is something the newspapers are running with because it's fun. It's an urban legend. A man in mask who can jump very tall, seen late at night. Why does this sort of blip of like folklore from 200 years ago persist into our social consciousness today? Why are we all talking about it? Why do we remember it? And what does it have to do with Batman? Spring Heel Jack very quickly made the jump from fiction, from fiction parading as nonfiction to just straight up fiction, right?
Yeah.
In 1838, that same year, March 5th, just a few months after the letter to the mayor, right? At the Royal Pavilion Theater, there was a stage play about Spring Heel Jack. We don't have a script for it. We don't really know much about it other than like they were advertising that you could go see a play.
Time in history where they didn't keep track of things. Right.
Yeah. We know that there was a famous horse race. Famous racehorse named after Spring Heel Jack.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
At the time in the mid 1800s.
That's fun.
Yeah. In 1848, there was, quote, a new comic ballet at the Royal Hull Theater called Spring Heel Jack. And by 1863, there was the first Penny Dreadful featuring Spring Heel Jack. Penny Dreadfuls containing him were very popular and would continue all the way into the 1910s. So like I said earlier, J.S. Mackley put together the Spring Heel Jack library. There's over 7 volumes of that published so far. The one I had you read in prep for this episode, it was from that very first Penny Dreadful in 1863. I had you read the first 2 chapters.
Yeah.
Of which there were 40. So it's basically a novel.
No way. Okay.
Yeah. A novel split up into 40 parts. And by the way, Penny Dreadfuls at the time were kind of wild. They would just stop in the middle. Like they could stop mid-sentence.
Mid-sentence?
Literally, yeah. They just chopped up a novel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they kind of assumed that you were picking it up on a regular basis.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? Like you read it. How'd you like it?
Well, I mean, I think that with the way that you've kind of laid things out and described them, it is, I guess, obvious to me that there is more fiction out there about this urban legend than there is like firsthand, like historical account. And I think this is a thing that we see in the world in general, like Abraham Lincoln and zombies, for example, or like there's tons and tons of stuff about like Jack the Ripper that cannot be backed up with any kind of like historical accuracy at all. It's just made up for the fun of fun, So there might be some nugget of truth out there that got the snowball rolling on Spring Heel Jack, but I think the vast majority of things that we've run across in our own, like even the stuff that I was reading or watching, I watched on YouTube. They were like throwing a lot of shade on Spring Heel Jack and like the urban legend, but then also like talking about like what the beliefs were because of all the BS that was flying around and stuff. It's kind of a fascinating, I guess, study on culture and how, I don't know, even today, like there is the news and there's like the spin on the news for like what will sell better or not, etc. And this seems like kind of in that same vein. It's kind of fascinating. So then you had me read these Penny Dreadfuls, and like out of the gate, I was like, oh, this is 1,000% this is fiction, because it's like it's like a first person account of Spring Heel Jack and what he was doing, what he was seeing, what he was thinking, and stuff like that. And it does pretty quickly set him up as a kind of a hero. To say that, I mean, the first chapter I read is he's a kind of a trickster. He goes to a bar, he talks to the police who's there, and like kind of like pulls some attention toward himself by like buying some people's drinks, and then like asking the police officer, like, "Are you afraid of Spring Heel Jack?" And the police
officer, have you ever seen Spring Heel Jack?
Yeah, he's like, "No, I haven't seen him, but like I don't know what the big deal is. If I saw him, I'd arrest him right away." Yeah. And this unknown guy that we as the reader know as Spring Heel Jack is like, oh, well, how about we make some bets? I bet you see him tonight. I bet he scares the pants off you and you don't do what you're saying. And the police officer's like, well, I bet you're wrong on those things. And I will. And if it is true that I run into him tonight, he'll be in jail tomorrow.
Yeah. He's talking a really good game.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes back and forth, and it is in this like old style prose, I guess. It's at times it's kind of hard to follow. There was like a whole page of just like quotes back and forth of what they were saying to each other. It
doesn't say who it was.
It doesn't say who it was. It's between 3 people at times.
But you're supposed to kind of infer.
and you kind of figure it out a little bit, but it was hard to follow. I really would have liked like every now and then like a said Jack or something like that. But
Sure.
anyway, really interesting back and forth with all that stuff. And then basically he like bends down to like tie his shoe or something innocuous like that. And then that's when he like pulls his mask down. He jumps back and he's like, I'm Spring Hill Jack, and and the police officer jumps back in surprise. And then Spring Hill Jack's basically like, I won my bet. And he like scares him. He runs off. And then he just humiliates this police officer. And that's like chapter 1.
He jumps on his shoulders and pulls the police officer's hat over his eyes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Very comic. Yeah.
It's super. Yeah. Sort of like comic violence, and then jumps away.
Yeah. Very cartoony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that first chapter, very much they're just setting up as like a trickster, as like a prankster of like, and they go out of their way to say like, oh, he never killed anyone, right? Like people are afraid of him, but like
he scared people literally to death. He didn't really harm people. He didn't take their money. And I did actually write down one quote they thought was written nicely. It said the context is basically like what people were talking about, and that he was leaving the impression that his satanic majesty had paid a visit to Earth. So they're saying that Spring Hill Jack, the people thought he was like the devil, like literally the devil.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, that is descriptive. There's quite a decoration there to the atmosphere at the time.
Yeah. Like we said, the Penny Dreadfuls would continue. There was this 40, chapter series, but there were many, many more. Some people told me to go look at the Human Bat, which is the volume 4 in the Spring Hill Jack library that Mackley put together. And I read a little bit of it. The story puts a normal person at the center of the story who's under suspicion of being Spring Hill Jack. People think he is. And he spends the rest of the novel trying to figure out who the real Spring Hill Jack is to clear his name. So Jack is not a hero. He's, in fact, they make him a horror monster instead. They basically make him a vampire. He shapeshifts into different animals, bites one of the victims at his neck, and in the first few chapters is drawn as a literal bat. So it's like a bat flying around, in the sky with like kind of a human face. It's a little weird, right? And that's where the Human Bat comes from, is because he's like a devil, vampire bat thing. And Spring Hill Jack is a villain. So, I don't think that's actually particularly relevant as an inspiration to Batman, other than how it inspired the next volumes of the Penny Dreadful. In 1904, there was a relatively short series of 12 stories published serially, attributed to an author named Alfred Burridge. And this is one that probably caused people to draw the direct comparison to Batman. He's humanoid again, rather than being a vampire. And because of that prior connection with Bat, in the one that had just been coming out in a couple of years prior, he's literally Bat. The drawings of him include him kind of wearing a bat cape kind of thing.
Really cool looking. It's a really cool. Oh man, I'm gonna describe the one on the right because that's the one I'm like familiar with, and it's I don't know if these are grave robbers or what, but basically there's a tombstone. There's like 3 dudes that are all looking like real surprised, and we've got Spring Hill Jack standing with. I mean, it's kind of like George Washington crossing the Delaware. He's like he's got like one leg up on the tombstone, and he's got his arms up to I don't know, kind of like a Y, like the YMCA Y, and the cape is coming down from his arms, and it's got the scallops just like Batman does. He's got white pants, but like pretty much everything else is black. He's got black shirt with like, it kind of looks like he's got ribs on it, which I will say looks really cool.
Yeah, it looks like a skeleton painted on.
Yeah, he's got like black belt, black boots, black cape. He's got it looks like a Batman cowl on, like even with the ears, except it doesn't cover his face. It just kind of like does a heart shape around his eyebrows, I guess, and covers. It's like a skull cap that comes down as a cowl.
Yeah.
And it's got the ears, and then it looks like a big red feather coming out of his like forehead, like sticking up, kind of like Jafar, I guess, from Aladdin. It's a pretty epic pose, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think it's like the most Batman thing like ever, but if you look at it and you say, hey, is that kind of like Batman? You'd say absolutely, right?
Oh yeah.
Because he's doing kind of a Batman pose. He's got the scallops.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you looked at this and you said to just any random stranger, any random person on the street, and you said there was a superhero inspired by this character, who is
Yeah.
it? Every
Yeah.
single one of them would say Batman if
Yeah,
they knew who Batman was.
They probably would.
Yeah.
I read the things coming off of his head more as horns than bat ears.
Oh, yeah. It looks, it's this, I'm describing the comparison. Sorry. But
yeah. In this version of the story by Burridge, we get to know his wealthy alter ego. So like we learn his real name, and he's an aristocrat, right? He has a butler who helps him, you know, he uses smoke to disappear from the scene or simply disappears in the middle of conversations. Another thing that he does is that he cuts the letter S into things as a calling card wherever he goes to remind people of Spring Hill Jack, much like Zorro would leave the Z. Yeah. There is no evidence on the record about Bob Kane or Bill Finger reading Spring Hill Jack or even being aware of Spring Hill Jack. But you can definitely see the comparisons. Sure. And not just with him, but also, I would say, even more strongly with Zorro.
Definitely.
So, you know, it's definitely the case that if not direct inspiration, it's part of the inspiration lineage. There's no way this is not in the chain that leads to Batman.